Awesome, let's do this. All right, so my daughter, Finley, she's 8 years old. She runs around this building like she owns the place, but she's awesome. And she, a few years ago, got a scooter. And when she was younger and she got the scooter, she was just absolutely obsessed with it. She rode it each and every day. And because she's my daughter, she would go as fast as she possibly could, because that's exactly what I would have done as a kid as well. And it was so thrilling for her, but it was terrifying for me and Jenna, because Finley loved going fast as she possibly could. But the problem was she didn't know how to stop. She wasn't really good at using the brake of the scooter, and as a result, it would cause her to skid out of control or hit a curb and eat pavement each and every time. Her favorite move on the scooter was what she called the flippity-dippity. And I'm pretty sure she called it that because she would go so fast, hit a curb, and she would flippity right on her dippity each and every time. It was so scary to watch unfold. But one thing I love about Finley is she loves to live fast. She loves to go as fast as possible. She's a thrill seeker, to say the least, which is awesome. But she had to learn the hard way that you also need to learn to stop if you're going to enjoy the journey that you're on. It's fun to go fast, but at some point you actually need to learn how to slow down and stop as well. And as I watched Finley painfully learn this lesson, I reflected on my own life, because I don't know if anybody in this room can relate, but I love going fast in life as well. I like achieving. I like going 100 miles an hour. I'm a goal-oriented person. Give me a task list. I want to knock it out faster than anybody else. My problem that I've had to learn the hard way, though, is you can't live your life going fast all the time. And if you try to live your life going fast all of the time, never slowing down, never braking, never learning to stop, life has a funny way of stopping things for you. Have you ever gotten so sick because you've just been going so hard for so long? It's like your body's way of saying, we're slowing down now. See, I want to talk today about what it looks like to live your life at a healthier pace. How to live your life not only enjoying the journey when you're going fast, but also learning the skill of knowing how to slow down and stop. Today, I want to talk about self-control. And I didn't think I was going to get like a round of applause for that. I didn't think any of you this morning woke up, you're like, you know what, I hope he talks about self-control, but I've never actually taught a full message on this topic, and yet I think it's such an important and practical message for all of us if we're going to live healthy lives and, most importantly, become more and more like Christ. We're going to need to learn how to practice self-control, and sometimes it's the simple things we forget the most. And yet it's the simple things that can make a great impact in our lives if we do them consistently. I think self-control is one of those simple but impactful practices that all of us need if we're going to become the people that God has called us to be. And so today I want to look at a popular passage written by the Apostle Paul. And he wrote this passage in Galatians chapter 5. He was writing to a community of new followers of Jesus in a city called Galatia. And he was trying to teach them what it not only looked like to practice the way of Jesus, but also what does it look like to become like Jesus. And he in Galatians chapter 5 taught on something that became known as the fruit of the Spirit. If you've been going to church for a while, you've maybe heard of the fruit of the Spirit. If you haven't heard of it, that's totally fine, because we're going to read it now on the screens. Galatians chapter 5, Paul writes this in Galatians 5, verse 22. He says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." Can we read that passage of scripture out loud together? I want to get it from your head to your heart. Here's what Paul says. Let's read it out loud together. "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." What if when you evaluated your life, those were the sort of words that came to mind? How good of a life would that be? Paul says this is the life that we are invited into as followers of Jesus. When Paul says, here's the fruit of the Spirit, and he says it's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, what he's doing is giving us this extremely clear picture of what it looks like if you are becoming more like Christ. In other words, he's saying if you are becoming more like Christ, you should be more loving, more joyful, more peaceful, more patient, more kind, more good, more faithful, more gentle, and more self-controlled. These are the fruit of the Spirit. And Paul begins the fruit of the Spirit by talking about love, which makes sense, right? Because love is where our identity in Christ begins. Love is where our identity in Christ begins. Our identity doesn't begin with guilt. It doesn't begin with shame. It doesn't begin with fear. It doesn't begin with effort. It begins with love. The first word that God would use to describe you is loved. And maybe you're here today just to hear that because you thought it was another word, but it's loved. That's who you are when Christ looks at you. See, the Christian life is not about living for love, but it's about living from love. It's about letting God's love form and inform everything about your life. Everything begins with love. And so Paul says, if you're going to become like Christ, it begins with love. And that makes total sense. But have you ever wondered why Paul ends this list of the fruit of the Spirit with self-control? It's sort of a buzzkill, right? Like, it's not this word that you're like, self-control, and you're like excited. No one gets goosebumps when you hear that word. Why not wrap it up with like passion or creativity or courage? I mean, those words have energy. They spark something in us. Had Paul used those words, the audience would have been like, yeah, make us courageous, make us creative, make us passionate. But he doesn't end that way. He ends with self-control. It feels like a sort of like spiritual womp-womp at the end of the fruit of the Spirit. And yet I wonder if Paul ends with self-control for a reason. And if he does, let's just imagine Paul wasn't just improvising Galatians 5, but he was being very intentional about which fruit of the Spirit landed where. Then why did self-control come last? Here's my best guess. My best guess as to why love starts it and self-control ends it is because while love is meant to hold your life together, a lack of self-control threatens to unravel the life that love is trying to build. That while love will hold your life together, a lack of self-control could unravel it all. Right? I've met plenty of people who are kind, they're gentle, and even loving, and their lives were unraveled because of a moment or moments where they lacked self-control. I've met spouses who were joyful, who were good, who were gentle, but as a result of a moment or moments of a lack of self-control, their marriage unraveled. I've seen entrepreneurs, chances are you have seen it and maybe even been one of these people, that you were kind and good and you were faithful with your work, but you burnt out because you didn't have enough self-control to know when and how to stop. As a pastor, I've had far too many pastors who were dear friends, who were patient, joyful, and kind people, and yet they destroyed their legacy because of a lack of self-control. See, I think of self-control sort of like a basket of fruit. Let's just imagine the fruit of the Spirit sort of like this. And Paul says in this basket of the fruit of the Spirit, you have love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness. You have all the fruit of the Spirit. It's this beautiful, abundant basket of fruit. And then you have self-control. And I don't know if I necessarily see self-control as just another fruit in the basket of the fruit of the Spirit, as much as I see that self-control is like the bottom of the basket. That when you have it in your life, it holds everything in place. But if you don't have self-control, it's like filling a basket full of fruit without a bottom. As soon as you lift it, what's going to happen? It's all going to fall out everywhere. You can grab that orange if you want, Allie. You can keep that, our gift to you. See, self-control is a little bit like the bottom of the basket. Now, when you have it, it holds it all together. But when you live a life without self-control, no matter how much love or kindness or goodness or gentleness or patience that you might have in your life, and all of that is good, all of that can quickly unravel and fall apart if you do not have the very last fruit of the Spirit, which is self-control. See, I don't think Paul put self-control as the last fruit of the Spirit because he thought it was like the least important. I don't think he was like, oh yeah, self-control, let's throw that in there if that works for you. I think Paul is telling us that self-control sort of holds everything together. And so let's talk about self-control. Like, how can we live a life of self-control? A life where all the fruit of the Spirit can be held together as we practice this. But first, let's talk about self-control. Talk about some myths with self-control. If you're taking notes today, this is going to be a great note message, by the way. So all my note takers in the room, you're going to love it. And if you don't take notes, all right? Here's the first myth. Here's the first myth of self-control is this. Self-control is about saying no. I would argue that's a myth. Most of us hear, though, self-control, and we think that self-control is just like one long, exhausting list of no's, right? No sugar, no screens, no spending, no spontaneity, no happiness, no, right? Self-control is just all about saying no, but let's just be honest, right? Saying no all of the time doesn't usually lead to transformation. It usually leads to frustration, and then eventually leads to burnout. So what if self-control isn't actually first and foremost about saying no, but what if self-control is first and foremost about something deeper? I would submit that sustainable, spirit-led self-control is not first and foremost about your no's, but it is actually about saying yes. That we practice self-control not because we need something else to say no to, but because we have something we're pursuing that is worth saying yes to. It's saying yes to who you want to become. Self-control is first and foremost saying yes to the life that you want to create. Self-control is first and foremost saying yes to becoming a person of love and joy and peace. Self-control is about saying yes before it's really about saying no. In fact, I would go as far as to say that if your yes isn't clear or compelling, your no won't last very long. If your yes isn't clear and compelling and worth saying no to, you might be able to say no for a little bit, but you won't be able to say no for the long haul. You see, you're going to need more than willpower. At least that's what Scripture says. In Proverbs chapter 29, it says this, where there is no vision, the people perish. And every time I hear this verse, it's always applied to like an organization or a business or a church. And they're like, if there's no business, then it's not going to go anywhere. Or no vision, then it's not going to go anywhere. And that's true. But I also think this is true for us personally. Where there is no vision, there is no life. Where there is no clear, compelling yes that you are moving and working towards, then you will have no clear reason to say no when you need to. So the first myth of self-control is that it's all about no. It's not. It's actually first and foremost about what you're saying yes to. Myth number 2 is that self-control limits your freedom. One of the biggest lies I think we've been sold, especially in the West, is that freedom means having no limits. Right? Like culture is saying that if you want to be truly happy, you need to remove all your boundaries, all your limitations, and then you'll find happiness. Follow your heart. Do what is right whenever you want to do it. And that sounds so empowering, doesn't it? Until it's not. Because the truth is, most of the people who are deeply unfree are not the ones with too many boundaries. The people who are deeply unfree and enslaved to some things in their lives, I've never met a person who's enslaved to some things that are like, it's because I just have too much self-control. Like I just have too many boundaries. I just have very clear limits on my life. No, often than not, the irony is those who are most enslaved are the ones who have no boundaries whatsoever. And they become enslaved by their impulses, by their habits, or by what people expect of them. See, culture says freedom is the absence of limits, but real freedom is the byproduct of the right limits. Like real freedom is the byproduct of the right limits. The late Tim Keller called this liberating restrictions. Right? We need some liberating restrictions that when you live out these restrictions, they actually liberate you to become the person that God has created you to be. I mean, think of it like this. Think of a river. A river needs banks in order to flow with power. But if you remove the banks, then the river turns into a swamp. A swamp is what a river becomes when a river loses its boundaries. It has nowhere for the water to go. And just like a river without banks, Scripture describes a person without self-control as a person who is vulnerable and living a life that is unsustainable. Proverbs 25, the author, he said, a person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. And that would have resonated to the first audience because in their world, it would have been ludicrous to build a city without walls. Because that city without walls would have been doomed to being attacked by any neighboring enemy. No protection meant no peace. No boundaries meant no flourishing. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want whenever you want. Freedom is being able to become who you were created to be. And if you're going to become who you were created to be, we're going to need some liberating restrictions and practice self-control. See, we got to change our mindset when it comes to this. Self-control doesn't restrict your freedom. It protects it. It protects it. I'm saying no to this so that I can keep saying yes to that. But if you continue to say yes to everything, then you'll not be able to say yes to what matters most because a life without boundaries eventually breaks. I mean, even Jesus didn't live without limits. He withdrew to lonely places. There were moments the crowd chanted, "Let's make Jesus king." And he was like, no, he rejected it. He embraced rhythms of rest and silence, not because Jesus was weak, but because he was wise. And he was showing us what it looks like to live a life of wisdom and balance through self-control. Myth number 3 is this: self-control is all about willpower. Chances are, like, if I had you close your eyes and say, like, imagine, like, self-control, what comes to your mind? And you would be thinking of, like, maybe a picture of a person trying harder, gritting their teeth, clenching our fists, pushing through the craving, the urge, the impulse, just holding on, be stronger, don't mess up. But here's the funny thing about willpower, is that willpower eventually wears out, right? Like willpower eventually wears out. There's actually research that backs this up. That there's multiple studies that show that willpower is this sort of finite resource. It gets depleted throughout the day as you make decisions, as you resist temptations and navigate stress. And by the time evening hits, you tend to be running on fumes. Most people don't make their best decisions at night, right? Because your willpower has been depleted. In fact, this is why this same study I'm pulling from says that most affairs happen at night. It's why so many of us make impulse Amazon purchases at night. This is why we have sayings like, nothing good happens after 2 a.m., right? We all know it. We all know that the longer the day goes, the less willpower you tend to have. Which means this: maybe the most spiritual thing some of you can do is to go to sleep, like go to bed earlier. It might be the one spiritual practice that transforms your life and creates better self-control. So when it comes to self-control, you don't need more willpower. I actually think at the end of the day, what you need is more surrender. Because here's what we need to know. Self-control is not something you can manufacture, at least not the self-control that Paul's talking about. This deep, grounded, unshakable self-control is something only the Spirit of God produces in us. I mean, notice, Paul called it the fruit of the Spirit, not the fruit of hustle, not the fruit of willpower, not the fruit of your own effort or the fruit of determination or the fruit of striving. Paul says this life and who God is trying to shape you into becoming is something that only the Spirit of God can do in your life. And Jesus said this much in John 15. Jesus says, "Remain in me and I will also remain in you." And then he says, "No branch can bear fruit by itself." Jesus is saying you can't overcome yourself by yourself. You can't willpower your way into becoming like Christ. If it were that easy, we would have done it by now. We need something bigger than us, outside of us, to transform us. And so self-control isn't about controlling yourself by yourself, but really self-control is about the practice of yielding yourself to the one who can change you from the inside out. See, the thing is, when we rely on willpower, I won't speak for you, but I'll speak for myself. When I get in this willpower mode, I tend to find myself in this cycle of striving and shame. Like when I'm just trying to work harder and be better and do more and level up my effort, like I end up just in this spin cycle of striving and shame, striving and shame, striving and shame. And Jesus wants to invite you out of the cycle of striving and shame and into a life where you are becoming more like Christ. So here's the good news. You don't just need to try harder. I'm not saying you don't need to do anything or try at all. But I am saying this, it's not just on you trying harder. At the end of the day, the most important thing as followers of Jesus we can do, if we want this, is to draw closer to Jesus. To draw closer to Jesus. And instead of striving, we trade striving for surrender through the act of self-control. Because you know what? Whenever I'm in this like lacking self-control mode, and I've been there, we all have, I tend to, when I look back on my life in that moment, I find I'm just trying to control everything. That I'm actually not trusting. I'm not abiding. I think I need this or I need that. I need to say yes or they're not going to approve of me, or I need to go and do that, or I need to get this and then I'll be happy. It's actually still me trying to control my life. So what is the route to practicing self-control? It's not trying harder. It's not striving. It's surrender and trusting that God is in control. Now, Paul, the same one who wrote about the fruit of the Spirit, he would also talk about life and use this metaphor of a race. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24 through 27, he talks about life as a race. And I think there's this connection between what we've been talking about with self-control and the race that we're all running. Here's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He says, "Don't you know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one gets the prize?" I love what Paul is saying here. If we were to pause, Paul is acknowledging something. He's like, all of us, the second you were born, you're in the race. But the difference is that there are more people who simply just like they're running with no intention, and he's inviting us to be people who run with intention, with focus to get the prize. He says, run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and I make it my slave so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. The word that Paul uses here is this really intense word that actually sort of suggests this image of like beating your body black and blue. What he's saying is like, I'm going to work with intention. I'm going to be strategic. I'm not just going to let life happen to me. I'm going to happen to life, and I'm going to run this race with intentionality and with focus. Because Paul is telling us something that we probably all understand, but we need to be reminded of, and that is that you will not drift into spiritual maturity. Like you're never going to wake up one morning on Thursday and be like, oh, I'm a saint. Like, you're not gonna be like, I'm just so mature now. How did that happen? No, that's not like how it works. He's saying everyone runs, but few run with intentionality. And so I'm going to run with focus. I'm going to run with intentionality because I know I won't accidentally become like Christ. I have to train into Christ likeness. And so he invites us to train like it matters. And he tells us 3 reasons why training like it matters. And the first reason Paul says is because everybody's race will end eventually. Paul's race will end, my race will end, yours will end. You might be late to everything you say you're going to go to, but there's one appointment that none of us will ever be late for, and that's our appointment with death. I know, super dark. Happy Mother's Day, right? But the truth of the matter is, like, nobody gets to avoid ending the race. It will end. And so he's saying self-control isn't about deprivation. It's about destination. It's about understanding this life is not all there is. And so I'm not going to just like live my life for the temporal. I'm going to live my life for the eternal. And I'm going to do everything in this life to run this race so that after this race ends, which it will, I won't miss out on the prize. See, why does it matter? Why should we train with intention? Because, hey, look, this race will end at some point. And second is that nobody will accidentally finish well. Paul says, I don't run like someone running aimlessly. I don't box like someone beating the air. In other words, Paul's saying, I will not live randomly. I'm not reacting to every distraction or chasing every desire or a slave to my own impulses. It's like Paul is saying, without self-control, you stop running the race and you just start running in circles. And I wonder if any of you feel like that. Like right now, if you're like, oh yeah, that's my life. I'm just like running in circles again and again and again, and I'm tired and I'm busy and I'm spinning. And it's not even because you don't want to grow. Maybe you do want to grow, but the thing that's causing you to run in circles as opposed to running your race is because you're running without focus. You're running without intentionality. Self-control helps you to choose your race and set your pace so that you can finish and finish well. But then Paul reminds us that this matters because self-control today leads to success tomorrow. An athlete doesn't see training as simply restriction. Sure, that's part of it, but really they see it as refinement. So they give up fast food and they give up late nights and distractions because they understand that while those things aren't like evil, those decisions today will get in the way of their goals tomorrow. Have you ever tried running after eating pizza the night before, right? Like what you do today matters and affects us tomorrow. We feel it, not only physically, but in our soul as well. And so self-control is not punishment. Let's get it in our head. It's not punishment. It's preparation. Self-control today determines the kind of person you'll become tomorrow. So what do we do with this, right? Like if Paul's saying, hey, this fruit of the Spirit All of it is who we're created to become, and self-control holds it all together. And this matters because we're all running a race, whether we ask for it or not. We're in the race, and this race will end one day, and you won't accidentally win the race. And self-control today leads to success to tomorrow. So how do we run this race well and keep the bottom of the basket in place? How do we practice this? I'm gonna give you 4 things that you can do as soon as you leave the building today. 4 things today that will help you get moving in this race that you're in with intention and focus and self-control. Here's the first thing, is get a vision. Get a vision. Get a vision for your life. A vision that is compelling. A vision that is something that is clear in your life. If you're miserable with who you are, if you're miserable with where you are, if you are miserable in your own skin and with what your life looks like, the first bit of advice I would give you is get a clear vision for your life. Most people that I've met who are miserable in their work, their relationships, or miserable in their own skin, all lack the same thing, a clear and compelling vision for their life. Like, who do you want to become? Where do you want to go? Because a life without vision is a miserable life, is it not? Like a life of existence, a life just trying to survive. I think whether we believe all the same things about God or not, I bet we agree a life of survival and existence is not much of a life at all. You were created for more. Get a clear vision for your life. So maybe today, the best thing you could do is leave this building and go to your apartment, shut the door, lock it, and don't leave until you get a vision for your life that actually excites you again. Or go for a walk on the beach with a journal, or go and spend 24 hours and get a cabin somewhere and just get a vision for your life. Because life is too short not to be excited about where you're going. Get a vision for your life. And understand this, vision for your life isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Vision for your life is not about perfection. You're never gonna have a vision for your life and you're like, and I know how it's all gonna play out. And I know how every answer to every question I can totally control. That's not how it's going to work. So it's not about perfection, but it is about direction. And see, I found that I can handle a lot of imperfection in my life, but what's really hard to handle is a life without direction. When I have imperfection because of a lack of direction, now that's a miserable life. So how do you do it? Get a vision. Get a vision. Second thing is this. When it comes to self-control, pick a target. Like, what is one area of your life today that you're like, I know this thing was a river, it's turned into a swamp. My schedule is not a river, it's a swamp. My relationships are not a river, it's a swamp. My finances, swamp. My faith, swamp. I don't know, like, it's all swamp right now. How do we bring in some boundaries? How do we create some banks in your life to bring focus and direction? Let's pick a target. Hebrews chapter 12 talks about this. It's so practical. The Bible I love is so practical. It says in chapter 12, verse 1, it says, let us throw off everything. Everyone say everything. Everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And I think a lot of times we tend to focus on the second half of the first sentence. So we're like, okay, we need to get rid of the sin that so easily entangles. But the writer didn't just say that. He said, get rid of everything that hinders. See, I think our greatest battles are not so much going to be the sin that's entangling us, but those other things that aren't necessarily evil things. They might even be good things, but they become ultimate things. And now they've entangled our lives. Or maybe it's your schedule. It's not like you're dealing drugs on the corner. It's just you say yes to everybody. And now your life is out of control. You have no banks. It's a swamp. How do we begin to focus on everything that is entangling your life and begin to bring some self-control? Let's just choose one. You're not going to probably transform your life overnight, but I bet you can focus this week on one area. Is it your schedule? Maybe it's your phone use. Maybe it's your spending. Maybe it's your reactions. Maybe it's your time with God. I don't know what you need to focus on, but let's pick a target this week. And then third, build a boundary. Build a boundary. Get a vision, pick a target, build a boundary, because self-control needs structure. You're not just going to kind of wish your way into a life of self-control. So what is one boundary that you can build this week? Here's a few examples. Maybe no phone after 9 p.m. Because you're like, man, I have made so many bad Amazon purchases after 9 p.m. I've made so many bad decisions after 9 p.m. I'm gonna disconnect from the phone after 9 p.m. Maybe it's taking a day off to practice the Sabbath. A Sabbath, taking a full 24 hours to unplug from the digital world, unplug from your work, and just be who you are. Be a human being instead of being a human doing. You know, like take a day to just rest. Maybe it's deciding you're only gonna check the news once. One time a day, that's it. Maybe it's daily 10-minute of silence because you have so much noise in your life, and it's just you practicing 10 minutes of just being still in solitude. I like what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6. He says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. Right? Like he's saying, like there's things that they're permissible. They're like not bad, they're not sin, they're not evil. You're probably not going to ruin your life with it, but they're not helpful. Those are the sneaky things. The things that aren't blatantly evil, but they're just really unhelpful. They're not nudging your life closer to who God has called you to become. How do you practice self-control? Let's not make it more complicated than it is. Get a clear vision, because your no will only be as strong as your yes is clear. And then pick a target. What am I going to focus on this week? And then how am I going to do it? By building a boundary. And the fourth thing is this: invite Jesus to lead. Because self-control isn't about willpower or striving. It's about trusting God is in control. And that God is way better at being God than you are. And God never expects you to have all the answers or have all the strength. He wants to be invited to be a part of the race that you're running. God is not just at the finish line telling you to hurry up. But I think God is more like your running partner, your coach, and the ground you're running on all at the same time. He is with us in the midst of this journey and race that we're in. So ask him to lead. God, would you lead my life? Help me to trust you. When I want to reach out for this because I think it'll satisfy, or when I want to say yes again, even though I know I should say no, or when I want to cross that boundary, even though I know that will actually limit my life, not free my life, God, help me to trust you. This is what Paul talks about in Galatians chapter 2. Paul says, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Wouldn't it be awesome if that were true for your life? Wouldn't it be awesome if you could write those words like Paul did and say, it's not me living, it's Christ who's living in me. I'm not there yet. How about you? I'm very much a work in progress. But I hope at some point in my life I can say, yeah. I've kind of died to myself. It's no longer my flesh who lives, or me who lives, but it's Christ living in me, because Christ is in control. So my invitation to you today is to live with intentionality. Don't settle for a swamp when your life was meant to have the movement and force and power of a river. But understand this, that won't happen on accident. It will only happen with focus and intentionality and with self-control. And most importantly, it will only happen when Jesus is leading the way in your life. Can we pray?